Thank you very much, Carol. Naya, lovely to see you here, Jacinda, and so many old friends and colleagues that I won't even start to name you. Lovely to be on the panel with Christine and Sandra as well. This is number 10 event on my busman's holiday. I must be crazy. I'm home for 3 weeks. I speak to Rotaries at Chamber of Commerce, given 2 university lectures at Christchurch, and I won't even list all the other things. But anyway, it's wonderful to be here and to be talking about issues that are just so critical. And I think we've heard 2 very, very important speeches through Christine's. She really emphasised the power of the individual, the transformative power of the individual who's determined to make a difference. Each of us can make a difference, whatever our capacity, and I think that came through so clearly. And then Sandra really set out some very, very serious issues about our own dear city and region. Extremely serious issues. I'm even more worried than I was before. But I hope we all kind of react that way and hold people to account, because it is a shocking story, a truly shocking story. And there's a balance to be struck, but it hasn't been got right. And there is a lot to be said in terms of low carbon development for cities going up, but it's got to be going up in the appropriate places. And the best places are the brownfield sites, right? Not wrecking character neighbourhoods, etc. And I must say I've been rather shocked over the years as a citizen of Auckland to see the really quite unseemly going up that went on down Hobson Street, Cook Street, and down around the old Beach Road area and so on. I don't know where the planners were, frankly, but anyway, that is one of the legacies that the council now has. But I think Sandra's put on the agenda so many issues that ought to be debated in the next local and regional elections, frankly. And let's hope they are taken seriously. One of my first jobs as a minister was as Minister of Conservation. And I did make a few landmark decisions. The Monowai mine on the Coromandel, which I didn't like at all. The court then overruled me, but it was done again by the next minister and the decision still stuck, so it must have been the right one all along. I remember refusing to permit a major marina at Nukahau, which was a relatively quiet hamlet around Lake Taupo. There was the Hector's Dolphin Sanctuary, the first one, Banks Peninsula. I was very proud of that at the time. And of course, being Minister of Conservation, you also had the cultural heritage hat as well. And I did rather like putting protection orders on things, but failed to save His Majesty's theatre. It was called helenClark by the ghastly developer. Yes, he went bankrupt, but not before he pulled down His Majesty's theatre. Mind you, my last memory of His Majesty's theatre was of Rob Muldoon being the narrator in the Rocky Horror. Literally have brought the house down. Anyway, last night at Lincoln University I was asked to give a lecture around Rio Plus 20, and I thought I might reflect on that here tonight, because Rio Plus, going from the individual, the local, the regional, think global, act local, let's talk about how these issues are panning out at the global level. And Rio Plus 20 has really had quite a bad press. That's where the press has bothered to report it at all. The British press has been pretty dismissive. The American press, by and large, ignored it. And heaven knows what was done in other languages elsewhere. I don't mention it got a lot of airtime in New Zealand. But if you read about Rio Plus 20, the major UN conference on sustainable development, which took place in Rio in June, and I was there among the 40,000 to 50,000 people, you would think it had been a complete and utter failure. I don't agree. And I really take as my starting point a very interesting piece I read in the Huffington Post. Now, people don't know about the Huffington Post, need to know about the Huffington Post. This is one of those centres of liberal and independent thought in the United States of America. And the piece, shortly after Rio, said, to understand Rio plus 20, put on your 3D glasses. Well, that's a headline that's going to get you interested, isn't it? So, think of Rio, says the writer, as cinema. In its simplest black and white small screen format, it was unsatisfying. Government negotiators failed to reach any agreements of note. This is true. But in colour, on the large screen with your 3D glasses on, it was much more. Creative leaders, impatient with the formal process, whether they be from businesses, individual governments, NGOs, communities and people's movements, banded together at Rio in thousands of ways to catalyse action outside the multilateral process. And one of the points I will come back to time and time again tonight is actually around the world, individuals, community groups, cities, regions, and yes, some businesses, etc., are all far ahead of the global negotiated minimum. You can't even negotiate a minimum now. They're far ahead of most governments. People are getting on and doing it, and the issues are so urgent that we just do have to get on and do it with the power and capacity that we have and not wait. And I should also note that one of the reasons we're discussing environment tonight is because Jill Ovens also approached me about speaking and said there's a very keen Labour network for environment, and we said, well, why don't we combine the two? The Mary Dreger lecture could be about the environment, so Jill, I'd like to acknowledge you for making sure that we got these issues on the agenda tonight as well. So Rio Plus 20 comes at the end of 40 years of debate among member states of the UN about the environment and development. Now, if you go back to the 1945 writing of the UN Charter, it was set up with three pillars. One was peace and security. The truth is, when people think of the UN, they mostly think about debates about what's the Security Council. Can it do anything about Syria? Can it do anything about X, Y, and Z? So there's peace and security pillar, there's the human rights pillar, and there's the development pillar. But of course, development always had a kind of meaning of growth, didn't it? The economy's growing, that was development. And how did you measure development? Well, you measured it by how fast your economy was growing and how much money you had. Well, that's rather narrow, as all of us who are interested in sustainable development know. And so, in 1972, there was a major conference in Stockholm, which has just been a 40-year event around, the UN Conference on the Human Environment. And then in 1987, Gro Harlem Brundtland, who'd been Labour Prime Minister of Norway, produced a report for the UN Secretary General on the environment and development. And in 1992, that report informed the first Rio Conference, which was the UN Conference on Environment and Development, the Earth Summit, which people like Bob Harvey went up to and came back so enthused about Agenda 21 and making Waitakere an eco-city and so on. It goes back to the Earth Summit. There was a Rio Plus 10 summit in 2002, which I went to as PM in Johannesburg. And then this year's Rio one was the Rio Plus 20. And was really set up to be a review conference of, well, what's happened in the last 20 years. But of course, you're never going to get away with just having a review conference because, I stress again, the challenges of inequity and unsustainability in our world are so great that you are really looking for a pathway forward and some decisive action to try and tackle those things. Now, the lead up to Rio Plus 20 was not very promising. The truth is, it is very hard to negotiate international agreements on many things these days. New Zealand always takes quite an interest in the World Trade Organisation around. Well, it's been stuck for years. It was launched in 2001. It's now gone longer than the Uruguay round, which went 8 years. This one, 2001, we're now 2012, 11 years. I mean, it's in crisis. I won't say more than that because I don't want a headline saying Clark says WTO. It's in crisis. They're now looking for what can be sort of snatched from the ashes for the least developed countries who, are really in quite a disadvantaged position on trade. So that one hasn't gone well. In Copenhagen in 2009, the Climate Change Conference, of course, did very, very badly. And they scraped something out of a green room in the end, the Copenhagen outcome. But Copenhagen was supposed to be the conference which signed off on the new international climate agreement. That was what the Bali conference was about in 2007. And it set out a roadmap for 2 years to Copenhagen, new agreement. It never happened. And then these conferences are every year. There was one in Cancun, which sort of kept the flame burning. Durban, last year, they got an outcome of the climate talks, but actually, it really, in many ways, took us back to Bali in 2007 because it set out a roadmap for achieving an agreement. And you do feel like you've kind of, it's sort of like a go-around with Monopoly, isn't it? You feel you've passed Park Avenue before. We're sort of coming back around Bali again with the climate change talks. So, very, very difficult. And then last year, the Commission on Sustainable Development did not have a productive meeting at all in New York, couldn't agree. This year, believe it or not, the Committee on the Status of Women failed to agree. I mean, so we go into Rio Plus 20, it was every prospect that you would get no outcome when the world is screaming out for answers on inequity and unsustainability. And the negotiators went round in circles for months and months and months. And I think one of the problems was that sustainable development is about 3 pillars. It is about the economic, the social and the environmental. How do we drive these things forward in a way that enables human development to proceed without wrecking the planet, right? But if you only deal with one of those pillars, you upset the others. But because Rio Plus 20 came out of the sort of environmental stream of the UN, the development ministers didn't get engaged, the finance ministers didn't get engaged. So it sort of goes off down the track. And then the developing countries start saying, oh, I don't know, look at this. One of the key themes for Rio was the green economy. That was new language. And when you introduce new language at the United Nations, you're always in trouble because what does that mean? And so the developing countries start saying, well, is this code for putting conditions on our trade and our aid? And I must say, as a New Zealander, I often used to think that with Europe we might sort of beat down the common agricultural policy, the export subsidies and the rest of it, and then they'd sort of rush round the back door and say, got you on food miles or something. So I can see the sort of justified scepticism that was coming from developing countries. And developing countries kept saying, look, we know the planet's a mess, but how are we going to do anything about it at the very time when you in the West are in economic crisis and your development budgets are drying up? Because if we are to develop green economies and sustainable ways of developing, we need some help here, and you're not offering a lot. And so the whole backdrop of this conference, apart from the fact that the sort of that north-south gap is quite large, geopolitically, was all this economic difficulty in the United States, in Europe, in Japan, where basically the West is broke. And to go into a major conference on sustainable development without money on the table is very hard to get a result. And it's worth remembering that last year, the volume of official development assistance actually dropped for the first time in 14 years, since 1997, for the first time it dropped back. So a number of us got extremely nervous in the run-up to Rio because the negotiations, which went on for months in New York, got nowhere. And by the time they were due to go to Rio, I think they agreed on about 20% of the text, and that was far from being the most important bits. So we go to Rio, and Brazil then takes the negotiating baton, and it basically presented take it or leave it text. Now there's always ups and downs to that. The outcome is not ideal, but it's better than no outcome. And what I say about it is that if you read the Rio +20 outcome document, it does cover every conceivable aspect of sustainable development. Actually, for any individual, community, city, region, government, whatever, who wants to act, the basis for it is there. Of course, it is not, sort of riddled with "we agree and we decide." That was too hard. That's basically left to national action, community action, and so on. But no excuses, folks. All the issues are there that need to be dealt with. And I think we should view the outcome document in that light and say that it was certainly good to have one rather than not to have one at all. So, let me go on then to talk a little bit about what I think was rather interesting about the leadership and engagement at Rio itself. Bear in mind that most developed countries did not send their leaders. The majority of the G8 leaders did not go. Now, there's an old phrase, power abhors a vacuum. So who did go? Well, the emerging economies, the BRICS, a new set of leaders out there. And they filled that vacuum, happily. And so this was a conference really that was driven very much by the voices of the developing countries. No President Obama, no Mrs. Merkel, no Mr. Cameron. Francois Hollande, to be fair, came as a new French president, and good on him. No Italian Prime Minister, no Canadian Prime Minister, etc., etc. So, it was the developing countries show, and they showcased what they were doing. The great thing about these conferences is not the formal session where really the third secretaries sit in the seats and take notes on the speeches, which are on the internet anyway. The action at these conferences, the action is around the side events, and we all put on side events. We put on a side event on how to measure progress, which I'll come to in a minute. But I was on one with the Prime Minister of Turkey, which is taking a very big interest in all of these issues and how you balance across the pillars of sustainable development. The Chinese had their show, the Indians. I did one with Brazil, where we talked about the concept of a socio-environmental protection floor. And this is really a very, very interesting concept, which fits well into a triple win approach to sustainable development that we're pushing hard at UNDP. That is, design policies which are set up to achieve wins for the economic, social and environmental strands of sustainable development. And so the socio-environmental protection floor which Brazil has, called Bolsa Verde, actually provides cash transfer payments to very poor people living in the forests who are part of conserving and preserving the forests. Great idea. And there are features of that in many of the social protection schemes around the world. We were involved in the design and still involved in the implementation and further development of India's National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. And that's the scheme which I probably spoke about last year, benefits some 50 million households in rural India, poor households, minimum number of days work a year, minimum pay rates, proportion of those involved who have to be women, 30%, it's actually 50% in practice, well exceeded the quota, participatory decision making about how the work that's going to be done is decided on by village councils, where 30% have to be women again on the village councils in India, and under the legislation the work that's prioritised is environmental. So it's tree planting, it's water conservation, it's digging reservoirs, it's things like that. So you can design schemes which hit all these buttons of greater equality, lifting people's incomes and being good for the environment as well. So all these kinds of things were shown at Rio, which was great. The second point was really the emergence of Brazil itself as a very, very significant player at this conference. Both in ensuring that there was an agreement and it had the geopolitical clout to do that, and also wants a legacy out of Rio. And UNDP and Brazil, I was part of a ceremony of this at Rio, we have announced the setting up of a Rio +20 World Centre for Sustainable Development. And it will largely be about promoting knowledge, innovation, sharing best practice of triple win approaches to sustainable development, and particularly encouraging South-South cooperation, really making sure that these ideas can spread across the global South. It will be very, very exciting. Another development out of Rio is that the Commission on Sustainable Development is going to go into existence and be replaced by a higher level forum at the UN, which I hope will really try to integrate across the 3 pillars. As I said, the Commission for the Sustainable Development became a kind of one-pillar body more. This one, I think, can really try to go out for the triple win approach, and hopefully develop a role of monitoring and keeping people, countries to the Rio commitments and plans as well. Now, very importantly, and this links back to the points Christine was making, this was a conference like no other for the engagement beyond the governmental delegations. There were tens of thousands of people there from every level of society around the world. Local communities, Indigenous people, community activists, cities, regions, companies, you name it. Everyone was there. And as I said before, they were far ahead of where the global consensus and agreement could be. For example, UN Volunteers, which is an associated program of UNDP's, did an online, sign up and make your commitment for Rio. Now, I double-checked the figure again yesterday, not too large. They got 64 million responses around the world. And this is phenomenal, isn't it? And so it wasn't just the presence of the tens of thousands at Rio, the online engagement was absolutely incredible. UN Volunteers, that was their effort. Then there was another one called the Rio Dialogues, which we helped Brazil with, where people, again, registered their commitments. And then there were around 700 formal commitments registered at the conference for more than half a trillion dollars, $500 billion. And that came from cities, development banks, and from companies. And rather more than half of it pledges into the energy sector, which I'll come back to in a moment because it's so important. But I really find this whole engagement beyond the member states and governments very, very exciting. And I think it says something about the future of summitry and how we really have to drive action on these issues. So where do we go from here with Rio as a platform? Well, I want to highlight just a handful of the issues which I think are quite exciting. One of them is energy. Now, we have a huge dilemma that probably roughly a third of the people on Earth don't have much access to modern energy services at all. 2.3 to 2.7 billion, depending how you define it, use traditional biomass, vegetation, trees, cow dung, for cooking and heating, which can be very unhealthy for people too. It's a huge 2 million people a year, mainly women and children, are said to die each year as a result of exposure to indoor smoke from fuels like this and unsafe stoves. So 1.3 billion don't have as much as an electric light. This is a crisis. So there's a huge need to get access to energy out at a time when we really need energy to be sustainable and renewable, but the easiest way to turn energy always on was to go the fossil fuel way, diesel, whatever, coal, etc. So how to crack the problem of people getting the energy they need for their homes. Forget about industry for a moment. it's just the sheer lack of power in the home that is a huge issue. Lack of power in the village, I probably spoke about that a little bit last year when I came as well. So there is a new initiative from the Secretary-General, which did get favourable mention at Rio, about sustainable energy for all by the year 2000, by the year 2030. And you always feel bad saying by 2030, because would you want to be cooking over a bad stove for 2030? Can we be more ambitious? Well, if it was easy, I guess the problem would have been solved by now. It isn't. And there's been quite a lot of interest in the initiative, and as I said, a lot of the major utilities are making some quite interesting commitments about helping. But the action in the end has to come down to a country and a community level. And our role in that is to, if you like, play a convening role with governments, development partners, private sector, communities, civil society organisations, the international NGOs, to work with countries on, well, how would you roll energy out to everybody and meet the other targets in the initiative, like reducing energy intensity, emissions, doubling the share of renewables in the mix, and so on. And clearly there will be a range of solutions to this problem. In the big cities, the big investment in significant plant and transmission may be the answer, but for the people at the last mile, and there's rather a lot of them, there's going to need to be a lot of decentralised off-grid options, which of course there is now the technology for, to do it in a renewable way. But let's hope out of Rio we get some push behind this. There was also a challenge issued by the Secretary-General on achieving zero hunger in his lifetime, undefined. I wish him a long and healthy life, but I would like zero hunger to be achieved before he or I turn 100 years old. Because, not far short of 1 billion people are undernourished in the world, and nearly a quarter of the people in sub-Saharan Africa are affected by hunger. And the Rio outcome document is very clear that grinding poverty is the major challenge of our times. And grinding poverty is linked to unsustainability in equitable outcomes. So initiatives around that and food security are extremely important. Now, there's also, going back to energy, the related issue of the fossil fuel subsidies. And here, Rio is actually quite interesting. Rio pronounced decisively against fossil fuel subsidies, which about 400 billion plus is spent on these subsidies a year around the world. We have the 400 billion to spend on sustainable energy, a rather helpful investment. But fossil fuel subsidies aren't easily done away with because the poor come to rely on them, while actually they get the crumbs off them. It's like, I often liken it to the common agricultural policy subsidies, always argued for by certain countries on the basis of the small farmer, but the big commercial farmers always got most of the money. And the same with fossil fuel subsidies. But if you just try cold turkey announcements, as the government of Nigeria did just before the new year, this year, then you will back off because people say, how am I going to run my little motorcycle? How am I going to have the fuel for my home cooking and so on? So it's going to be quite an exercise to support countries to put in place the social protection and cash transfer schemes which will compensate poor people for lifting these subsidies. But I think at least it's positive that Rio pushed very, very hard in that direction. Now, the issue of how to measure development progress. What is progress? Well, the UNDP's been campaigning against the GDP as a sole measure of progress for the last 22 years, which is why it promotes the Human Development Index every year, which measures countries not just against income level, but against health and education status as well. Of course, that doesn't measure what we're doing to our environment to get to this level. And the challenge now is, how do you actually incorporate this into a measurement of how well we're all doing? How is our world progressing? Is it progressing sustainably? Now, it is not easy to devise indicators around this. I remember in the run-up to the Johannesburg Sustainability Summit in 2002, our own dear statistics department had a go at sustainability indicators, and I personally found them rather less than convincing, but that might be because it's not an easy task. But a lot of minds are being applied to it. The UN Statistical Commission has adopted a system of environmental economic accounting to monitor progress on increasing green investment, creating green jobs, improving energy and resource efficiency and recycling. At UNDP, I think we could prepare a sustainability adjusted human development index. We do an equity adjusted one. We do a gender equity adjusted one. It's very interesting how the ratings change when you put these factors in, by the way. And let's not mock little Bhutan and the gross national happiness index, which is getting some traction, actually, as people look for, what is there more to in life than money? It is happiness. There was a high-level event at the UN, which I chaired the morning sessions of a few months ago, when the Prime Minister of Bhutan came, and many wise words were said about the gross national happiness approach, and he, the Prime Minister, and Bhutan have some of the world's leading economists and thinkers in behind this. But I was struck by some of the simple truths that came through at the session. For example, the Buddhist monk, a French national who spent most of his life in the Himalayas, who said in the course of his address, if a nation is the most powerful and wealthy in the world, but its people are unhappy, what is the point? But what is the point? And another eminent professor of psychology pronounced at the session that Freud was wrong when he said that the best we can hope for in life is not to be miserable. He said the most we can hope for in life is well-being. So there's a lot of thought going into this, and I think we really need to take a constructive interest in other ways of measuring progress rather than how much money we've got per head of population. So, looking at it all in the broader picture, I'm rather inclined to be positive about Rio Plus 20, because I just think it's one of those events where there's a lot of convening around it. People do go away inspired by what they've heard and seen. Yes, the outcome document fell rather short in many ways, but actually so many people aren't waiting for that now. They're actually taking action into their own hands, and that's really, I think, what very much came through Christine's message, and I have to applaud that. The way Rio was framed, the outcome document was entitled from the outset, "The Future We Want." Well, UN Women has produced a very nice little book that says, "The Future Women Want." Basically, this book really celebrates the power of women as agents of change. It points out the obvious, that women actually are disproportionately affected by degraded ecosystems and unsustainability. But it says, don't see women as victims. Support women to make the change they want to see. Support women's education, support women's health services, support women's equal rights to own the farmland, access the credit, support women's involvement in contributing to being part of, being leaders of changes to sustainability. There's so many things you can do to get women right into the frame. And as Carol has promised, I just want to end with a couple of words about amazing women giving leadership, or who have given leadership on the environment. And let's start first by paying tribute to Wangari Maathai, the amazing Kenyan woman who in 2004 was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, what did she do? She founded the Green Belt movement in Kenya in 1977. She didn't have an easy time. She was harassed, she was beaten up, she was treated extremely badly, but she was the inspiration behind the planting of millions of trees in her own country and elsewhere in Africa. Was appointed the Goodwill Ambassador for the Congo Basin Forest Ecosystem in the mid-2000s. The Secretary General in 2009 named her a UN Messenger of Peace. She authored many books, sadly died at 71 of cancer last year. But just a quote from one of her speeches: "Faced with the challenges of climate change, environmental degradation, food shortages, worsening poverty, and the global financial downturn," this was 2009, "it is ever more important that we double our efforts to protect and rehabilitate the environment, reduce emissions of greenhouse gases, and provide especially the smallholder farmers around the world with sustainable ways of increasing their production and meeting their livelihood needs." Truly a great woman. And the second person I wanted to mention was Mary Robinson, who was President of Ireland, and some of you may remember Mary coming here. She has a brother in Timaru, actually, so she probably comes more often than we ever know. But she did a similar thing to what I did after leaving office. She went to the UN and became the Human Rights Commissioner for a term. And since leaving that, she has got very involved, particularly in climate justice. She's very exercised by climate justice. And this has really become her big cause, and supporting the Council of World Women Leaders, the Elders. She's part of that group with Nelson Mandela and others, but really climate and the environment has become the big issues for her. There's many others that one could mention, but I thought that those two were particularly worth singling out because they've done such an outstanding job. So, Carol and Jill, thank you for getting us along to speak tonight, and I was really loved my two co-panelists' addresses, and I think on the message that Sandra brought, don't let these issues just go under the horizon. We have local elections, the turnout is often pathetic. It's often because people don't think the issues matter. Oh, what do they do? Well, you've heard what they could do and what they're not doing. And I think it really is important to get out and support people who will take these issues of the sustainability of Auckland seriously and lead a council which will do something about it. Thank you.